Afternoon. Now, you may recall at a prior estimates hearing we had an extensive discussion about the PsiQuantum legal services contract.
Yes, we did.
That went for rather a long time, didn't it?
Hard to recall, but we did canvass quite a lot of issues.
You don't remember it?
Not every blow-by-blow account, no.
It was a long time. Is the Department's Chief Legal Counsel, Ms Richards, here?
Yes, she is.
Well, could you please approach the table?
I'll just note, though, that the contract was managed out of the project team that was looking after the transaction. All the details around the scheduling, etc., would be best put to them. But Ms Richards looks after the legal.
Yeah, I guess it's these are governance issues, so I figured that corporate's an appropriate place to raise them. To the extent that you can answer, Ms Richards, can you please inform the committee as to whether this contract is the only legal contract relating to the government's deal with PsiQuantum?
Sorry, Senator. Janine Richards, Chief Legal Counsel. Can you repeat that question for me?
Can you confirm whether this is the only legal contract relating to the government's deal with PsiQuantum?
Which legal contract are you referring to, Senator?
It is the legal contract that we discussed last time. I believe it is with the law firm. And I don't have that detail in front of me, but which is the major law firm that the department has contracted with?
Kingwood Mallison.
Kingwood Mallison, thank you very much. Is this the only legal contract?
It is the... let me phrase it from the perspective that legal services to support the transaction were provided by Kingwood Mallisons externally and by internal lawyers within the department.
Yes.
And because there were some international elements of the transaction, there were disbursements that involved the engagement of international lawyers, and that occurred through the contract with Kingwood Mallisons.
Okay, so the department only engaged Kingwood Mallisons.
So we also had other consultants that come under the description of legal services.
Oh, who are they?
So we had Sentia Consulting Limited and Spark Helmore Lawyers.
Who's Sentia?
So they predominantly provided probity advice, but they do come under the general description of legal services.
Yeah. And how much was that contract?
So total expenditure for the financial year that I've got is $160,612.
160K for probity for Sentia?
They certainly provided probity. I'd have to double check with the project team whether they provided other advice, but they certainly were engaged predominantly for probity.
Okay, so what was Kingwood Mallisons doing then?
They were focusing on the commercial transaction elements.
They weren't doing probity?
To the extent that they had questions or raised things up, but we had a dedicated probity advisor.
Who was that?
From Sentient Consultancy. To manage issues to do with conflict of interest, probity plan, making sure that we were managing the project to the highest integrity standards.
So what sort of advice did Sentia provide on their probity issues?
So they provided probity briefings to people involved in the project. They supported people in managing conflicts of interest. They provided a probity plan to the project team, both within DISA but across elements of the public service. They also managed, it was a dynamic plan, so it was adapted over time depending on the nature of the activities. They supported the accurate record keeping of various parts of the transaction, so all the usual things that probity advisors provide services for. We quite often have probity advisors on significant activities in the department.
Yeah. I used to be an internal auditor, so we used to do a risk and control matrix, so you would sort of do your risks and then you'd have a control in place. So that's right. Those sort of documents they would produce, yeah?
Yes, they certainly, there's discussions around the risks and then discussions around whether actions needed to be taken and what mitigations might need to be put in place.
Cool. So did Sentia do a risk and control framework or matrix?
I'm happy to for the team that managed it in terms of the precise activities that they provided. I wasn't close enough to know exactly what they called their documents, but they certainly had what I understand to be a probity plan and provided dynamic services through the process to manage all the aspects required to ensure that the probity was at a high level.
So there was a matrix done up?
Separate to the probity, there was, as all project plans, we have a risk matrix where we look at all the different risks and the
and what were the conflicts of
mitigations.
interest risks?
So there was conflict of issues is managed through our general processes. We have every individual in the department has a requirement to lodge conflict of interest documentation, mandatory training, and then for particular projects we, as on a risk-based assessment, increase the oversight. In this case, all the individuals provided specific project conflicts of interest related to the particular project, which would have covered issues to do with protecting confidential information, activities of connecting to stakeholders to make sure that people were not talking to stakeholders on inappropriate matters. We had to manage conflicts because, of course, the government's got an investment in another quantum company, so we put controls in place for those sorts of things.
But what about conflicts of interest to do with the executive government? Were there any conflicts identified there with ministers or ministers' officers?
So the probity advisor did provide briefings to those people involved at a high level in the ministers' plural offices. They received briefings about their obligations. They did provide information about whether they had any actual or perceived conflicts of information, and they were managed appropriately through the process.
Was there one of the conflicts of interest identified, one that may have existed between Minister Husing's office and the company Blackbird?
So Blackbird was not a party to the transaction and had no connection to the process of assessing PsiQuantum.
It wasn't identified by Sentio.
So the Blackbird was not a party to the transaction. They weren't engaged in any aspect of the project. They weren't party to any of the discussions related to the project. And so I have seen media reports of a connection, but I am not aware of any connection at all.
Okay, so what were the main conflicts of interest that were identified by these independent, these third-party law firms?
So it would have covered the usual issues about whether people had investments in activities associated with the activity, whether they had any family or relationship connections to the company that was involved, whether there was any conflicts between the advisors on the process as well.
Sounds very thorough.
All the usual things that you would expect.
And did they?
Did they identify conflicts? There may well have been conflicts identified through the process. I'm not aware of all the individual things. A lot of the reason why you get a probity advisor is that they can have oversight and manage things in a way that protects confidentiality of people's private information as well.
So there were conflicts of interest identified?
I don't know whether there was or wasn't. All I know is...
Well, is someone here know whether there were?
So the probity advisor has identified that people provided information. He worked through those things. We had discussions around the necessary mitigations, and he has provided a assurance through the process that all necessary mitigations were taken and that all probity processes were done to their satisfaction.
Well, can you provide
this
risk and control matrix with the identified conflicts of interest?
So I'm not sure that document exists. As I said, I'd have to take it on notice or ask the team that know more about the documentation. Individual conflicts of interest are usually protected for privacy reasons, so I'm happy to take on board whether we are or aren't allowed to provide material of such a nature.
So are you filing a PII claim?
No, I'm happy to take it on notice.
Okay. And no one else here knows about these conflicts of interest?
So we can. We were anticipating this to be after the break in the section identified as investment, science, technology and commercialisation, which is where the team that did the work will be.
Which outcome is that?
1.2.
Okay, so you want us to come back and ask you a question about that then, do you?
The team that were more involved in the process is there. I can state that the probity advisor has provided a a statement to us that they're satisfied that any potential perceived or actual conflicts of interest with any individual who is involved in the project was appropriately managed with adequate controls in place. That is their assessment of perusing all the aspects of the project from when they were engaged until the finish of the project.
Okay, so I note that, Secretary. So Sentia was paid $160,000. How much was Spark paid? Did Spark work on probity as well, do you know?
Total expenditure was $16,619.
$16,000. What did Spark do?
I am not directly familiar with their involvement, but the team that will be here later would be happy to walk you through that.
So maybe I should then ask Ms Richards. So last time we talked about the ratcheting up of the value of this contract with King of Wood. So I think last time it was 3.3 million. Now I believe it's gone to 3.6 million, with 2 increases since the last Senate hearings. Is that right?
Senator, yes, the current maximum approved value of the work order is 3.6 million.
Why has this contract gone from $3.3 million to $3.6 million?
Well, Senator, the legal services engagement to support was a very complex transaction as occurred over 3 stages. And those stages coincided with government's decision-making in relation to the progress of the transaction.
Yeah.
The first stage was a due diligence phase. We called it Part A, due diligence and the development of a non-binding term sheet negotiation. So the department engaged KWM to assist with those Part A services, and they were to provide information before government made a decision on investment.
Now, when did the EOI start?
Sorry, when did we select KWM?
No, when did the EOI on the quantum contract start?
You'd be best placed addressing that to officials in the next outcome, Senator.
Okay, I think we did this last time. Okay, so all I can ask you about is this contract from a corporate point of view then. I can't ask you about anything else.
Not in relation to some of those details about the transaction.
We'll come back to that maybe then. I think, are you aware of any further increases in value of this contract? Beyond 3.6 mil?
Well, there are other elements of the services being performed, but the contract with the department and that work order has ceased.
So that's the end of it, 3.6?
Well, I think that requires me to speculate, Senator.
I'm just asking if you're aware of any increases in the value of this contract.
Well, it'll depend on the steps that are necessary, if any, are outstanding in relation to financial close of the transaction. And financial close of the transaction is being managed under a work order with Export Finance Australia.
Okay, that sounds like it's unlikely. Okay. Now, was there we also discussed last time you were here the report from the Office of Legal Services Coordination. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So this was flagged as a significant legal issue for the Commonwealth, wasn't it?
The transaction was, Senator, yes.
Now, you took on notice at that hearing when it was made known that it would be a significant legal issue for the Commonwealth. Now, as far as I can see, you haven't answered that question yet in the last 5 months. So do you know what the answer is?
Yes, I do, Senator.
What date? So when did it become known as a significant legal issue for the Commonwealth?
Well, the department notified the Office of Legal Services Coordination about the transaction as a significant issue in February 2024.
What date?
The 26th.
26th February, which year?
2024.
2024. At what stage then was the engagement with King of Wood Mallesons?
Kingwood Mallisons were engaged in July 2023, Senator.
Okay, so effectively 6, 7, 8 months after.
Well, Kingwood Mallisons' work, as I suggested, commenced on Part A, which was the due diligence and non-binding term sheet part of the negotiation. So that was work that was done prior to government's announcement of a decision to make that investment.
So did Kingwood Mallisons identify issues perhaps concerning probity which caused this notification?
Relating to probity, no, Senator. I think the decision to notify would have been taken on the basis of the nature of the work that was being performed. So the second part of the contract with KWM, as I said, we had 3 parts: Part A, Part B and Part C. Part B commenced in February 2024.
Yeah.
That was when KWM were engaged to assist with Part B services, and that was the work that involved drafting and negotiating the contractual documents and legal due diligence. So the notification to the Office of Legal Services in February 2024 coincided with the commencement of that part of the legal work.
And when was the official decision made to do a deal with PsiQuantum?
Prior to the announcement in April
April which year?
2024.
April 2024. So this all happened before it was announced?
So the government announced the decision at the end of April 2024.
Yeah. But the notification to the legal coordination branch was made 2 months before?
In February 24, yes.
Yeah. You don't think that's a bit strange?
No.
When did the EOI finish?
So the EOI process occurred, just trying to get my dates right. So market testing via a confidential expression of interest process occurred through October and September 2023.
So how long did it go for?
So the expression of, there's a work from the team leading up to the opening of the expression of interest. The expression of interest was opened on the 11th of August and closed on the 11th of September. And then there was a process after...
11th of August 23.
Was when companies were invited to receive the documents for the EOI.
And it closed in September 23. Of course, at this time, the department had already contracted with Kingwood Mallisons regarding PsiQuantum, hadn't it?
Regarding work on the issues around quantum computing, yes.
Yeah, which is why I think there's been a lot of feedback from the domestic industry that they felt that the EOI was not a serious process for them to compete in.
And that's not a characterisation that I accept.
I'm sure that's... I'm not surprised to hear you say that, but that's the feedback that the industry has no doubt tabled to you.
So we have had discussions. The issue is that we had been in discussion as we canvassed last estimates. The government had been in discussion and asked us to be in discussion as a department with a company. As part of the decision-making process, it was important the government tested the market to see whether other opportunities were available. That market testing occurred in a real and concrete way and was part of the government's decision-making process.
Okay. Just the problem here is now it's taken us 5 months to get the answer about when the notification was made about to the Legal Services branch. We've now heard that it happened on the 26th of February 2024, which is 2 months before the announcement. Why did it take... I mean, firstly, why didn't the department answer the question?
I think I explained at the last hearing when you asked that question. I'd been in the role for 3 weeks, Senator. I don't recall taking it on notice, so if I failed to answer that, that was my omission.
Fair enough. I will check with the committee, but my sense is we did put it on notice and we'll check that. But
we're happy to check it. We usually provide answers to the questions we're asked to.
Yeah, okay. So it was determined to be a significant legal issue for the Commonwealth on 26th of February 2024. But when was the decision made by the Minister?
Prior to the announcement in April. It was not made by the Minister, it was a Cabinet decision.
But was it made before 26th February?
I mean, that is a matter for government decision making. You're asking around the connection. Quite often in government processes, there's a various kind of discussions. Legal advisors are brought into different processes for different activities. There's a threshold for significant legal matters to be reported, and we would have gone through our usual processes as we do with all transactions or other activity that we undertake working with our legal services centre. Clearly, the judgment was in February. It reached that threshold and we reported it as appropriate.
Is that before or after the decision was made by Cabinet?
I don't know that exact date.
You don't know which day Cabinet decided to go with PsiQuantum?
I don't have that before me, no.
Okay, well, can you take that on notice?
I'm happy to take it on notice.
Yeah, because I would have thought that it would be perhaps hasty for the department to be indicating a significant legal issue before a Cabinet decision.
I would bow to my legal experts as to the criteria for significant legal issue. I'm not familiar with the thresholds.
But maybe was there any informal direction given by the Minister ahead of the Cabinet judgment?
You have to be kind of clearer in your questions.
Well, my question is, did the Minister indicate to you that he wanted to go with PsiQuantum before the Cabinet judgment?
So we went through a process of extensive due diligence, legal, commercial, probity and national security considerations several times through different various intergovernmental processes, including through Cabinet processes. Through all of that, this project was examined in every way you could possibly imagine it being examined, and the government came to a decision as part of their deliberations to invest in the PsiQuantum company.
So I guess my last question, Chair, is when was the judgment made to go with PsiQuantum, i.e. what day was the Cabinet meeting that made that judgment?
So I've already taken that on notice, Senator.
Thank you.